Welcome back. Now, before we go any further and actually start looking at biblical text and interpreting the history of Tartaria and things like that, we did the video on Andronicus Christ. Now, before we can go any further, we have to understand that there's a split that's going to happen, and it's not the so-called 1054 Orthodox Catholic. That, first of all, that didn't happen. Second, it's a much more defined split. And perhaps the best way to show this to you, look at the globe, and you'll notice that Tartaria runs and Russia runs right up to this place called Europa or Europa. This split is right down the middle of Western Europe. Now, I lived through 1989, 1990. I know what the Iron Curtain was. It's interesting because if you look at the so-called historical atlases, they're all going to tell you there's a Holy Roman Empire over here. And then there's the Ottoman, Tatars, Russians, all on that side. There's the East, and there's the West. Now, you cannot understand the Bible or the Quran or any of these things without understanding what happened after the death of Andronicus. Now, I'm just going to read something here. You probably know this line. Very famous. Genesis 13:8. Then Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herders and my herders, for your kindred is not the whole land before you. Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, I will go to the right. If you take the right hand, I will go to the left." And what happened? They split. Now, if you went back to the Andronicus video and looked down at the video link that not the video link, the text link that I sent on the Nikon Chronicle, if you did a word search, you type a word in, Control F, and you type in Peter, you would find Peter there, the Apostle Peter, right after the death of Andronicus as a messenger or envoy. Now, what did that have to do with it? It has everything to do with it. Because there are several divisions in the Bible most people never see. This is one of them, the Peter-Paul division. The Abraham-Lot one we just dealt with, but there's another one. You get from Genesis all the way to the middle of Kings, you get to the end of Solomon, and then the kingdom divides, and everything looks different. And in the prophets, you get you'll be saying one thing, and then all of a sudden you'll interpolate something and say something else. What's happening is there's an eastern and western section to all this. And just to show you how this works, I'm going to actually, let's just quickly look at the book of Acts to explain this. You go for the first 7 chapters. You got persecution, things, apostles are running away, they're being persecuted. This is what we see in the early, like the 12th century, 13th century iconography. The apostles are all in hiding. Saul is shown, Saul, not Paul, is shown as the persecutor. What do you see in Acts 7? Stephen is put to death. That's what happened in the Chronicle. Stephen put to death. Saul, they laid a garment at a young man named Saul. Saul approves of it, the next verse, in 8 verse 1. In chapter 8 continues other things that happen. In chapter 9 we get the whole conversion story. Chapter 10 and 11 are the conversion of Cornelius, and then you get this line. Acts 11 verse 19. Pay attention. Now those that were gathered because of the persecution that took place over Stephen. What? Did we time travel here? That was several chapters back. There's a bunch of material that's been added in the middle, including the conversion of Saul. Now, if you go on in the book of Acts, about 90% of the rest of the material is about the Apostle Paul. Saul, also called Paul. That one of those, there's 2 places that occurs. One of those lines probably not in the original text. The other one, editorial. So we got this separation between Saul and Paul. Now, if you go down in this video description, I'll show you who Saul is. He knew Andronicus, and he persecuted the kinsman of Andronicus. Now, he's not Paul, though. And let me show you why I say this. Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Very, very famous chapter. But we're not going to read the part that most people do. We're going to go down a little bit to verse 5. He appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. He appeared to more than 500, etc., etc. He appeared to James and all the apostles. Okay, we get it. Last of all, to one untimely born, he appeared also to me. Why? You just think about that for a moment. Then you go to Galatians. Well, I don't need to go to Galatians. You probably noticed this. You know, I didn't go anywhere. I received my gospel directly from Christ. And then 14 years later, I went up to Jerusalem. And I saw those that appeared to be pillars, Cephas, James, and John. But, guess what? Let's actually quickly go to Galatians, because this is actually going to blow your mind. Did you think that Jerusalem was on earth? Jerusalem is, yeah, chapter 4, I'm trying to find the verse, but it says, Jerusalem above is free, and she is our mother. See, he's not the same generation as those guys. Those guys died a long time ago. He went up to Jerusalem to see them in a vision, like I revealed what Christ showed to me that the night he was put to death. He put, he had bread and he had the wine. That's in 1 Corinthians 11. He had a vision. I went by revelation. I saw it by revelation. I went up to Jerusalem. I communed with them, and they said, "You can go there. We'll go in heavenly Jerusalem." So, the next link in the video description is probably the historical Paul. Now, we have to be careful because his letters are going to be added to by what we call not declare, and then going to be final editing. But this east-west division is occurring. Now, I'll show you why. Here it is. We have the event that we talked about in the last video. We have the 12. Revelation version 1 is going to be written around 1204. That's the destruction of Istanbul, or Jerusalem. In the west, the Q tradition comes out, all the sayings that are associated. Saul persecuting these guys. 1308, the Templars are going to die. Read this book, by the way, if you ever get a chance. Along the other line, along this line, this one, we have the first version of the Bible. We got Genesis to 1 Kings 10. We got some of the writing version. Eventually, Revelation is going to be added too. All the stories of the Old Testament, all on this side, including the signed Gospels, the early version of John, including the Deuterocanonical, the Apocrypha, and the Quran. On this side, the rest of the Book of Kings, what we call the Deuteronomist history, possibly the Book of Jasher, addition to the prophets, addition to the writing, and the Gospels if we have them today. And this will eventually lead us down to a final editor right here. The so-called Marcionite, the Gnostic tradition of Paul's letters, is in the 1400s. This is after Plato. The 12 apostles, the 12 patriarchs. Paul, starting with two different Pauls. The first one we call Saul, then there's Paul, and then it's edited by this guy, and then it has to be completely edited. And by the way, the key point of intersection between these two lines is this date right here. That's the sacking of Constantinople. Now, once you can understand this, you understand why the Quran is written the way it is. You understand why everything else is written the way it is. There's an east and there's a west. There's a Tartary by the Romans, the actual Romans, or the Moors. And there's the Holy Roman Empire. And what did the Nikon Chronicle call the Italians and the people in that area? The Latins. That's all it calls them. It doesn't call them Romans. We're the Romans. They're the Latins. The sons of Lot. I'm not going to give you any of their land. It says in Deuteronomy. Go by the way of the wilderness. That's their land. The sons of Ammon, the sons of Moab. By the way, have you ever heard of Ovid's Metamorphosis? Zeus and I think it's Bacchus come down. They dine with an older couple. The city going to be destroyed. They take the people by the hand, lead them out. The city destroyed behind them. It sounds like something in Lot's life. And Romulus and Remus. What did I just read to you in Genesis 13? You go to the left, I go to the right. You go to the right, I go to the left. That's what you see. But you don't understand that until you understand that there's an Eastern Tartarian layer, Ottoman layer, all of that's in the East. But then there's a Western, what we would nowadays call Roman layer, but it's not really Roman, it's a Latin layer. And unfortunately, that's the layer that's going to overshadow everything else. But if you mind things down a little bit, you can figure this out. Which is why it's important to go to every single different text. Which is why it looks like in Revelation, are you saying the exact opposite of what quote unquote Paul says? Yeah, because they're on opposite ends, opposite sides. That's the whole point. And it's not saying that this isn't true. It's saying that they, from different perspectives, and you're actually getting a round universal shape of everything. But you got two distinct things, splits that happen. And the split happens roughly even before 1204. That's in the sacking of Istanbul, or Jerusalem. But even before then, there's persecution by this Saul guy. And all the iconography, by the way, the iconography, all start off with the apostles and Christ. On the Bosphorus, by the way, that's where all the pictures are. And then you start seeing more things being added. And eventually you start seeing things like David, Solomon, things like that take off later. Because they're from the East. You start seeing things in the West. The West starts off much differently. They're not doing this sort of stuff like Michelangelo, David, and all that until later. So this is vastly interesting, but you cannot understand it without understanding this split. Once you understand that there's two different sides, then you can start to see the different layers that are in there. So now we'll move on to probably Revelation.